Can you hear me? My name is Robert Caples. I am a member of the American Protection Specialist. We were here last year, and was anybody here last year when we were here? So you guys kind of, not very many people, but last year, there were people, outside forces, outside the university who tried to stop us from speaking. And you know, people were nervous about us talking, and when we got here, we actually had somebody from the university pull me aside and said, "What are you guys going to say? Are you going to name people? Are you going to say names?" And I said, "Well, you're going to have to just watch the presentation." And they sat up there in the front row biting their nails the whole time. So, but I don't see them here, so I guess we're good. Well, to start, I want to tell you about some things that have taken place here in Hidalgo County. This covers pretty much like a 10-year period in our county. What we've seen, what we experienced was, during this 10-year period, there was a lot of contract rigging in the school districts, in the cities, in the county. And by the way, everything we say, we can back it up. Okay? And we proved it last year, and we're here to do it again. If I tell you something, we back it up. So there was a lot of contract rigging going on in the county, in the school districts, in the cities. We had people that were being hired for political reasons, people being fired for political reasons. You had a circle of politicians that were surrounding themselves using our taxpayer money to get all their supporters employed by the government that you and I pay for. And so, in the middle of it was a sheriff who was part of this political circle, and it was very, very hard to get people into office that was not part of that circle. So we got to the point where a group of citizens got really, really fed up with all of the corruption that was taking place in Hidalgo County, and they started to organize a group, and they started to have meetings, and in one of these meetings, it was said that the government of Hidalgo County has become destructive to the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness of the citizens, and it is our duty to amend it. And that's how this group that I'm talking about got started, and they began to expose corruption, and they began to complain about it, and they began to get louder and louder and louder. They took it to the authorities, and they had good people on their sides, like local attorneys. And in fact, in one of these hearings, the attorneys that was speaking for the group said that the current government retains its political supremacy in Hidalgo County through the power of the judiciary, controlling the grand jury, and thus preventing indictments for election frauds and other crimes, and through controlling petite juries, reward their own followers, and through the strong arm of the law, thus control and punish those who dare to combat the orgy of crime and corruption which has run rampant and unchecked. Okay? The next thing that happened is that this group of citizens, they couldn't get the media to run the stories that had to do with corruption involving local politicians. They just didn't want to do it. Okay? And so they just kind of were out of the picture, and these people were on their own, trying to expose it as best they could. And after a while, this group of citizens it kind of evolved into a movement, because the more things the public heard about the corruption, the more they demanded to know, and then they began to demand action. Okay, and then one day, finally, the media started to figure out that they needed to jump on the bandwagon because it was not going to stop. The public was going to go, and they were going to demand and demand and demand. And finally, one day, they started to get the media to get involved. And in one article, the Monitor said that we as a people have no mind to go forward, but to come face to face with the political unrest that is staggering the foundations of our commercial life. We call upon the officials of Hidalgo County to immediately vacate their offices so that men who will be acceptable and competent can be appointed, thereby doing a great service to the county and people. Your long tenure in office has enabled the unscrupulous to build up a political machine to wrest from the hands of the people the sacred power of the ballot. Okay? So then everybody turned, and everybody stood up and had a voice and decided they were going to fight corruption. And all this pressure eventually led to the resignation of the sheriff. Okay? All of the things that I have described to you happened in a 10-year period, starting in 1920 and ending in 1930. So why am I telling you this stuff? Corruption is a cancer. There is no cure for it. It can only be treated. And every time you guys fall asleep, these people do whatever they want. Okay? They do whatever they want with our money and positions that you and I own. Okay? It just keeps coming back. I have a friend that teaches history, and he says, learn your history or be history. And I'm going to pass it over to Javier Peña, and he's going to talk about this disease and how to treat it.
Thank you. Well, in order to understand corruption, we must first understand what it is and what the corruption is actually corrupting, what the system is supposed to be. So to illustrate this point very simply, we've come up with some graphics, and in high school civics class, we all learn 3 branches of government. Those 3 branches exist from local politics all the way up to the federal politics. We've got mayors, commissioners, and municipal judges, and we have a president, Congress, and the Supreme Court. That's the system we have throughout our system. Now, in those 3 branches, we have departments, cabinets, committees that help govern within those 3 branches to help support, create a framework of support for the rest of us to be able to live and live happily, cohesively as a society. A lot of you are probably taking these classes, you hear about social contracts, natural law, all that kind of thing, but fundamentally, we all agree and we all live under this structure so we can live without killing and looting and causing mayhem. We have rules, we have guidelines, we have a structure that we can live happily and pursue our freedoms and our happiness. Now what happens is this system, the way this works is, it runs on money. Our entire system is an economically based system. The taxpayers pay the money to the government. The government then takes that money and votes and passes law on programs that will ultimately give a benefit to the rest of us. That's the way it's supposed to work. They vote on programs for schools, roads, police forces, fire departments, the military. Our tax money is used for that. And that system works. Our money goes to the government funds the programs provide a benefit for the taxpayer, and that cycle keeps going and we all live happily ever after. Or so that's what we're supposed to. That's what they teach us in the textbooks. But in reality, something different happens. When the system becomes corrupted, the main part that is affected is between the government and the programs. And you have that part of the system break down. How does it break down? Well, we have different things going to the contractors and the people that are running these programs down here. And those contractors then give an additional benefit outside of the legitimate cycle or system that we have to the people that are voting on those contracts. So what ends up happening is we end up getting less of a benefit from the money we are supposed to give to the government we then, because the government no longer has the money to provide us that benefit because it's being siphoned off in this system over here, this corruption, we end up having to pay more in taxes. More sales tax, income tax, property tax, because now we have to feed not only these programs, but this system over here that everyone is profiting off of and people are getting fat off of. Now, this happens with, and you hear this in the media all the time, the campaign cash, contract rigging, the kickbacks. We've heard a lot in this recent election about campaign cash. And actually, with all the allegations that were made against our former sheriff, what brought him down? Illegal cash contributions and failing to report and being exposed, and that opened the door to everything else. That's what brought him down. Now, it's not just contractors giving this cash and these kickbacks, it's people like Tomas Gonzalez, who's referred to as El Gallo, pled guilty today, this morning, for this kind of activity, giving illegal money, cash, and seeking favors. Commander Padilla testified and admitted in federal court that he took money for favors, for access to information, for protection, for drug dealers. There are several lawsuits on file right now in federal court and in state court regarding contract rigging. Contractors giving $50,000 to the La Jolla School Board for a $2.5 million contract. Tax collection firms giving money for tax collection contracts. We even have in deposition testimony, one of the insurance agents that got one of these $1 million contracts admitting once he gets the contract, he doesn't do anything. He doesn't show up for work. He doesn't process claims. All he does is collect the check. That check comes from us. It's our tax money paying for that. And he got that contract because of kickbacks. Now, how do we know this? Like Robert mentioned, we back everything up. There's actually a video where these guys were talking about these payoffs in a city hall with the audio and video equipment running, not knowing that it was running at the time. We got an open records request, we got it, and they've admitted to everything. So we know this happens. Now, not only does this happen, and this system is going, they need to make sure the individuals, whether they're criminals, contractors, or whatever, any person that's seeking some kind of political benefit, they need to keep these people in power. So how do these people stay in power? The next part of the equation is the political hiring. And that does two things. Political hiring and firing go hand in hand. Have you ever noticed that when there's a round of elections and a new commission comes in, city commission, county commissions, there's a bunch of people laid off and a bunch of new people hired? Happens all the time. It's almost expected. It's not supposed to happen that way. But what they're doing is people that don't play along with them get fired. They're now an example to everyone else that will dare stand up to them. They also hire political allies, family members of politically powerful families to secure their voter base. That's why this happens. That's why certain people are always getting certain jobs. That's why positions are created in Hidalgo County Precinct 3 that didn't exist prior to a certain election, and then right after the election, they create a brand new position and put someone in there. That person happens to be a patriarch of a large voting family. Now that family is loyal because they owe this certain individual a job. That's how this process keeps going. And it will continue to go on and on and on unless we do what APS has been able to do and other people have been able to do by exposing it and standing up. Now, these are the people that are benefited. These are the people, the contractors. And without going into a lot of the details, it's not just the sheriffs, the drug dealers, it's building contractors, it's insurance agents, it's anyone that has a government contract that obtains that government contract or that government employment through a nefarious way. And in local politics, it's almost, you throw a stone, you're going to hit someone engaged in this kind of practice. Now, going back to the way the system is supposed to work, when the system becomes corrupted, and we have that siphoning off of the benefit, and we're having to pay more and more into the system to keep it running, what ends up happening is the system gets flipped. And now, the system isn't supporting us, we're having to work to support that system and the people that are in power in that system. And it just continues to make our life miserable, and it just grows and grows and grows until ultimately it will crush us, because we can't sustain it. But it doesn't need to get to that point. Now, if you've been reading the newspaper articles, the local paper, Texas Observer, and some national paper articles online, there have been a lot of comments about, well, that's just the way things are in the valley. It's part of the culture in the valley. The whole, mordida, you give it, if I give you a benefit, you have to give me something back. And that got us thinking, what culture are they talking about? Because the valley is a very unique place. Are they talking about the American culture, the Texas culture, or the Mexican culture? I don't know which one they're talking about. But let's talk about it. The American culture. Is that a culture that accepts corruption? Well, we were birthed by a group of people that rose up against that kind of tyrannical corruption and risked their lives and their families' lives to fight against it. People like Thomas Jefferson, who by simply writing the Declaration of Independence was signing his death certificate if they didn't win that battle. But he believed enough in this anti-corruption and fighting against this oppression that he stood up for it. That's our American culture. What about our Texas culture? We all know the legends, the famous people, Travis, Bowie, all those people that fought at the Alamo, but even the lesser-known people like Gregorio Esparza. He was a native Texan before Texas was Texas, before any of the settlers came here. His family was rooted here. But he saw the way the Mexican government was treating the landowners and the citizens of Texas, and he decided to fight against it. And he was given multiple opportunities to escape and to leave. Even at the Alamo, he could have left, but he decided to stand his ground and fight, knowing that that meant he was likely to die. That's our Texas culture. What about our Mexican culture? I'm sure we all know Emilio Zapata. He fought for the agrarian rights. Poor peasant farmers were being treated like slaves, and he rose up and led a rebellion against that, against the ruling class. And his famous quote, I'm sure you all have heard it, if you all don't have it memorized, is, "It's better to die on your feet than live on your knees." That's our Mexican culture. So I don't know which culture they're talking about when they say that corruption is just part of our culture. Maybe they're talking about our county that's limited. Well, Hidalgo County. Our namesake, Father Miguel Hidalgo, was a Jesuit priest in Mexico who rose up against corruption, against the poor farmers who he tried to get to plant food so they could feed their families. And the Mexican government wouldn't allow it. That was a crime. So the people were being kept poor and hungry, and he decided enough was enough. That kind of corruption wasn't going to exist. And he rose up, and he fought a rebellion. He actually took control of several cities. He had an army of, 600, 900 soldiers, and completely outnumbered, but they fought, and they won a couple of battles. Ultimately, his fight, he was betrayed, and he was turned over, and he was executed for his crimes. And he was given a chance to repent. He was given a chance to escape, and he said no, and he stood his ground. That's our culture too. Corruption is not our culture. Standing up to corruption is our culture. Some of us may have forgotten that, and some people may want us to continue to forget that. But anyone that studies history and where we come from knows that as a people, however you define yourself, we do not condone corruption. Now, recently there's been a whole lot going on, and Robert, if you can help with this. As Robert mentioned at the beginning, APS was here last year and made several predictions. A lot of people thought that those predictions were bogus. We were just talking without anything to back it up. And it's actually been called, everything we've said that we claimed we could back up were called baseless allegations multiple times. In newspaper articles, in responses to lawsuits, in responses to open records requests, baseless allegations.
By the way, as we're going through this, one of our operators is over there. He's got a mic. And if you have a question in the middle of what we're doing, raise your hand so we don't miss out on your question, okay? So we're going to do that as we go.
If you have a question you want clarified, let us know.
We're going to talk about the Panama unit connection. There are, who here does not know about the Panama unit? Holy smokes. In 30 seconds or less. Panama unit was a Mission Police Department, Hidalgo County Sheriff's Office drug task force, okay? Short and sweet, they were all indicted. They were selling dope that they were stealing from dope dealers. And they were all indicted in federal court, and they're going to be sentenced soon. Good? Good enough? All right.
You forgot that one of the members of the Panama unit was the sheriff's son.
Oh, sorry about that, yeah. He worked for Mission Police Department because he couldn't work for the sheriff's office because that would be very obvious violation of the nepotism laws, right? So the police chief in Mission agrees to hire the sheriff's son, who has zero experience in law enforcement, and then puts him on this task force, and he goes, and he's still working for his dad, but not really. That's how they got away with it. So that's the Panama unit. Now, here's the thing. They're getting ready to be sentenced. You know, there was a sting operation where they were going to steal some dope, and it turns out that it had a GPS system inside the dope, right? And the sheriff shows up, and he says, "Whoa, what's going on here?" And he cuts the wires to it because, as he testified in federal court, that he thought the bad guys might follow the dope, and it was for safety reasons that he cut the wires. So, all of that sentencing that's coming up is based on that sting operation that was run by ICE. Okay? But it might surprise most of you to know that they haven't been charged with all the serious crimes that they committed. They haven't been arrested yet. And if they're not going to be arrested, well, then you guys need to raise hell, because they did a lot more stuff than just a little, moving dope down the street. One of the things they did was, we found out through an informant. Okay? Now, you guys are going to love this. You're not going to hear this anywhere else. I'm about to give you an insight into some of the things that we have done that we gave to law enforcement, and to this day they have not done anything about it. Okay? So, we meet with an informant, and he tells us that the sheriff's son and another guy who was also indicted by the name of Fabian Rodriguez, right? Yeah. So they go to a ranch somewhere in Weslaco. We know the location, but just in case somebody's doing their job, we're not going to disclose the whole location. But they go to this place. It's a warrantless raid, and they sure as hell don't have consent to come onto the property. But they go in there anyway, and they get this poor ranch hand who happens to be undocumented, and Jonathan took a baggie out of his pocket of cocaine, personal use, yeah, probably, but he drops it on the table, and he tells this guy,
that's what we're going to charge you with, unless you give up where the drugs are at. So this ranch hand gives up 8 kilos of crystal meth. Okay? And yeah, they thought it was like training day or something, I don't know, but these guys are running around thinking they're Denzel Washington. And so then they take the crystal meth, and then they get the guy and they take him to the bridge and they make him self-deport. They order him to walk across the bridge. So now they got rid of the problem, right? Well, they did. The guy called back and he's very upset, and someone got a hold of us, so we went out there and we recorded the conversation, and the informant tells us all about it, right? And we're like, okay. But then he tells us something that we couldn't hold on to. And what he said was, the real owners of the drugs, they're going to take these guys out. Okay? So now we have to go, and we have to meet with the FBI, and we have to tell them, hey, the informant told us that, you know, they're going to kill these guys. You know? I wish he hadn't told me, but he didn't.
And they knew who these people were. They didn't just say, we're going to go kill who.
No, they knew who they were.
Jonathan.
Right, they named the sheriff's son and the other guy. So, we meet with the FBI agent. That FBI agent goes and tells the sheriff. And we know that he was told because the next day, we got word from the deputies that they were having to go patrol the sheriff's house. Well, why the sheriff's house? I didn't mention his name. Well, it's because his son was living with him. And he had been for quite some time. Right? So, that's the incident. That incident in itself, if they're doing security at the sheriff's house, I would say that the FBI told them the news about what the informant told us, right? Okay, I want you to remember that. All right, that was in the spring of 2012. Okay, a couple of months later, all the way in July, there's a home invasion on El Dorado Road here in Far. All right, that was on Channel 4. I don't know if you guys saw it. The homeowner speaking out about what had happened. If you haven't seen it, go on YouTube and look up go to Action 4 News and look up their just kind of, I don't know, do home invasion or whatever. And I forgot the title. And so it's another warrantless search. Do you know what they said they were looking for? They were looking for illegal aliens. Now the sheriff's office is the Border Patrol. They were in there demanding to know where the illegals were. What? Then they didn't find any, so now they changed their reason, and they wanted to know where the drugs were. Well, they didn't find any drugs. They turned everything upside down. They can't find the drugs. Now they want to know where the money is. Okay? When they don't get what they want, they put this elderly man and his wife into a truck, and they take them down the road, and they tell them, you're going to call somebody who's going to bring us drugs. Or you know what's going to happen to you. The man says, you know what? Why don't you just take us to jail? And Jonathan says, the sheriff's son, he says, no, you're not going to jail. You're going to go somewhere else if you don't call somebody. So guess what happens? They call somebody. And they meet at the Mott's Cash and Carry over here in Far. That guy shows up with the dope, and they steal his dope. Okay? Now, it turns out these people go and they left them walking over there, and they told them not to use their phone or do anything because they were being watched. Okay? I don't care if they have badges. That is a home invasion. That they're just as dirty as anyone without a badge who pretends to be a police officer. You know why? Because in both cases, they don't have the authority to be there, right? It's a home invasion. So, what happens is these people get home, they call FAR PD, and they file a report. FAR PD, somehow they end up going to the FBI. To this day, the FBI has not arrested these guys for the home invasion. Okay? That was in July of 2012. So, they start to clean up the mess. And guess what? These idiots left a gun behind. So they have to call FAR-PD again and tell them, hey, there's a gun. And there's a gun in our house, and I guess those guys left it here. So FAR-PD has to go back out and collect the gun. FAR-PD calls the sheriff's office and says, there's something very wrong here. So Internal Affairs shows up. Commander Joe Padilla is going to take care of this thing. Okay? He pled guilty, yes, he pled guilty to taking bribes and whatnot. So he's going to take care of this thing. The man says they stole jewelry from him. Okay? We find out from our sources within the sheriff's office that they had located the jewelry. It was inside Deputy Claudio Mata's vehicle, also indicted. Claudio Mata says that he forgot to turn it in as evidence. In what case? Evidence of what? We don't know, but that's what he said. So he gets written up. He gets written up. It's like, it's a home invasion, but he's getting written up. It's an aggravated robbery, folks. But he gets written up for next time you need to turn in your stuff, and you're going to get suspended for 5 days. And that's what happens. But there's all these allegations. Now you have incident number 2, where the sheriff had knowledge that his people are dirty. Incident number 3 is where they get caught with their hands in the cookie jar because the dope has the GPS system in it. And Lupe Trevino shows up and he cuts the wires to it. He testified in federal court that he had no idea that these guys were dirty cops. I call BS. I just told you why he had to have known.
Also, the basis allegations was the connection to the drug dealer, Tomas Gonzalez, known as El Gallo. And if you all remember, if you all read the articles, Lupe Trevino said he does not know Tomas Gonzalez, and those signs must be cloned. Tomas Gonzalez had campaign signs on his property. I think he still does. They're still up, or they were until recently.
They were there yesterday.
Campaign signs are still up. What is Lupe's response? Oh, they were cloned. People love me so much that they go out and pay for signs for me because they love me that much. The people love me. That's actually what he believed. That's what he said anyway. And he swore to it. In federal court, newspaper articles, I swear, I don't know him. I don't know about these signs. We had testimony, we had proof that he accepted cash. The feds have that as well. After these allegations came up about Tomas Gonzalez, his inner circle began to crumble. That's Commander Padilla and his chief deputy.
That's chief of staff.
Chief of staff. Couldn't be deputy because she's not a law enforcement officer.
And
right?
she's not a U.S. citizen, so yeah, she couldn't be like that.
So they had to make up a title for her so she could fit in that role. Pat Medina. Both of which were arrested and indicted, and both which flipped on Trevino faster than you can imagine, and gave up all the evidence, all the information about the cash transactions, where the money went, how the money was handled, who it came for, what people got in exchange for that money, the protection, the access to the information, what operations were being held. That he already testified to that. He admitted to all of that. So now, after a year, over a year of claiming he didn't know these people, these are all baseless allegations, his inner circle saying, nah, might be some truth to it. And they plead guilty to these federal indictments. Or one of them's a federal indictment, the other one's a plea of true to an information. So, it now comes back to our good former sheriff. And these baseless allegations have now become true allegations because he has pled guilty. to every single thing that we have been saying he's been guilty of for years. Over the ridicule, and there's no way. Even if it's true, you can't prove it. Oh, we don't believe it. Every public official connected to him swearing up and down that he's a good, honest cop, and these are baseless allegations, and there's some kind of political baseless allegations, and you hear that a lot in these kinds of cases. Oh, it's just political. It's political. All these allegations are political. Well, they're politicians. Yes, every single time you criticize a politician, they can claim it's political. So when someone says it's just political, they're hiding something. Or potentially hiding something. Let's not speak in absolutes. But he's pled guilty. He resigned. He pled guilty. He knew it was coming. That's why he resigned. So he could keep his retirement. That's the final twist of the knife. Even though he's indicted and he's guilty of a federal crime, he's still going to be living off our tax dollars. That's the way the system works for us. Now, I don't know if you all saw the Time article that came out recently, the past couple of days. McAllen was found to be one of the scariest places to live. People in McAllen apparently don't want to go out in the dark. We're all afraid. We're all in fear of our lives. And they report about that even though we've got low crime stats. And it doesn't make sense. Why are people so afraid? Why do people carry guns everywhere? Why don't people let their kids play out in the street or in the yard anymore? It's on paper, it looks like the valley is very safe. The Sheriff's Department has given us glowing stats of how great a job he's done in reducing crime. Hey, go ahead.
Well, they didn't even try to make it look believable. 60% plus reduction in crime, folks. It's freaking Disneyland here.
Overnight.
This is the happiest place on earth. Go ahead.
There have been newspaper articles written about this. Channel 4 has done a story about this. APS has uncovered the fact that those low crime stats are manipulated. And there's a video. Is there a link on the APS Facebook page to it? If not, we should put one up. There should be.
We took an undercover video of the sheriff's crime scene specialist telling our guy on hidden video how they manipulate the crime statistics. And in the video she says, okay, check this out. If it's like an aggravated assault, we can turn that into a simple assault. If it's an aggravated robbery, we can turn that into, burglary of habitation. Now it's a property crime. Disneyland.
With the stroke of a pen.
Yeah, so then, of course, Nadia Galindo from Channel 4, she confronted Trevino and said, hey, what about this? You guys are manipulating the stats. And he goes, that's preposterous that anybody would question my integrity. And he said, that video has no credibility. I'm like, that's the chief deputy's daughter. What are you okay? That was the chief
working for the Sheriff's Department.
Yeah. So, when they found out that we had taken that video, the chief deputy resigned. I don't know if it was because of that or he just decided to retire, but that's how that went down. And so, he maintained that that was nothing but BS. And during that same newscast, we showed a man, because we don't just say they're manipulating the crime stats. We have to show you reports, right? We have to say this is an example of how they did it. But one of them was a guy who was kidnapped. And where was it? Sullivan City? They kidnapped him, they take him to Reynosa, and they kill him. No crime occurred here, according to the sheriff's office. Nope. Well, the family says, wait a minute, who's going to investigate who took my brother? I don't know, talk to the Mexican police, they killed him over there. Yeah, he was kidnapped here. So people can come from Mexico, pick up American citizens, and take them back? Seriously?
What was it reclassified as? Public concern, welfare concern.
Welfare concern.
That's what it was.
We have another one over in Westlaco. There's an elderly lady, three or four guys break into her house. They're armed with knives. She startles them. They cut her up. Burglary of habitation. You heard me. Burglary of habitation. No, it should be an aggravated robbery. Home invasion. No. Burglary of habitation. And this went on since 2005. Trevino took office in January 2005. March, people started crying about corruption and cook stats and all this stuff that was going to happen. You know? And that's how it went. But everybody had a take-home car, so, you know, people sold their souls because they did not report what went on. Okay? And nowadays, everybody comes out and says, yay, you guys did it! Man, we did it! Like, we? Those are brave cowards. They never did the right thing. They fought to keep a job, a government job that you and I pay for. Where was the loyalty to us? To the citizens? Trevino didn't pay for their jobs. We did. So,
in going with the manipulated crime stats, when this goes on for quite some time and people find out that people don't get prosecuted, people become more and more afraid to report these crimes because they know the police aren't going to come and save them, but the people they're reporting will retaliate. So there is an entire group of unreported claims because people are afraid to report them because they know nothing will happen. The people who attack them will not be taken down. That's why we have the system that we have. And we also have a chief of police, and we have deposition testimony now of a chief of police that testified that he goes along with, he calls it playing the game. And he will continue to play the game even though he knows it's wrong because he's got daughters who he needs to pay for college. And so he's going to continue to play the game for 2 years and just do whatever these people tell him to do. Because if he doesn't, he's gone. So he's selling all of us out so that he can keep his job. Instead of standing up and fighting these people, arresting some of these people, and changing the system. We have so many examples. We were trying to decide which examples we would use, and there are so many. It's ridiculous how ingrained this corruption is and this pattern. But we can change it, and we have started changing it, and more people are losing that fear of standing up and reporting. Standing up to these people. More and more people are standing against it. Now, in these articles that we're reading, like this one from Time Magazine, there's a very politicized term that has become common language, and that's spillover violence. Anytime there's a kidnapping, there's a drug deal gone wrong, there's a high-speed pursuit, it's spillover violence. There's a murder, looks like a drug deal. Is it spillover violence? And it's such a politicized term that it makes you lose focus of what we really should be focusing on. It becomes a Democrat saying there is no spillover